So on to special diets and restrictions because yeah, everybody likes to know about which diet's the right one to do and yeah, which restrictions or when you should restrict, all that kind of stuff. So just some advice on what you recommend.
Any particular special diets that are coming to mind there?
Um, I didn't have any questions specifically. I know the biggest one that probably comes up, and it's the one that I follow, would be intermittent fasting. So I know a lot of people that do that one, especially at the gym. I've currently have been doing it for 6 years, but if somebody says, "Oh, should I do that?" That's something that I do. I don't recommend that other people should do it. It's more, this is what's working well for me because it works into my lifestyle to be able to get up and not have to worry about breakfast and get out the door and, have my black coffee and, it doesn't affect my day. And then I have lunch and then have dinner. And it works well for me. But that doesn't work if you've got kids and they've got to eat breakfast and, so I know it works for some people, but that's probably like, is your advice on
Yeah,
that
so
one maybe, and then versus,
most of
high.
those time of day type eating patterns will work when it's one or two people maybe of a similar age that maybe a partner that wants to eat in a similar way. But they don't tend to work well, you're right, with younger children in the house. And when I say younger children, really up until sort of middle of adolescence, there's a lot of modeling of normal eating and diversity of food. They've got active growth requirements. And if there's very, very different food availability and rules for the parents compared to the kids, then it tends to not be helpful as far as limiting disordered eating. But in the adult space, there's no active growth. So there can be more flexibility with time of eating. Really important if somebody is totally changing the times of day that they're eating, that they're just taking stock of if they're on any regular medications and maybe having a chat to their pharmacist around if any of those need to be taken with food or separately to food, and if necessary, modifying the time of day of some of those medications as well. So that there's no issues with interaction and that you're still getting those medications working properly. The very, very small windows of eating, like, look, I'm only going to eat in one meal a day, or maybe sort of 3, 4 hour window and things like that, which we do hear from time to time, that can be a bit more limiting because we end up then with a large amount of fueling in one hit. And so, particularly if you're someone who's potentially got family history or at risk for diabetes, you're going to be getting a whole heap of fuel at once that the body's not necessarily going to be processing well. It also depends, I think, on your own stomach capacity. So some people can eat quite a generous sized meal and get enough fuel in a couple of meals, and other people find, look, they've only got a little stomach capacity. And if they
Mhm.
did that, they might be just, rapidly losing weight and not getting enough fuel in for the day.
Yeah. Um, Now I just had one. This kind of goes with this one, but also with the last one, so I will just bring it up. So, what about meal replacements with protein shakes? Like that's.
Yeah, so meal replacements are a little bit different to a protein supplement in that they are designed as an energy restriction tool. So they often will be, used 2 to 4 times a day to achieve a very, very low calorie diet, so a less than 1,000 calorie diet sort of realm, whilst protecting as much of the micronutrient intake as possible. So if you ate only sort of 800 to 1,000 calories through whole foods, it's really, really difficult to get all of your different micronutrients through food because you've only got a relatively small volume of food. So the
Mhm.
meal replacement industry ticks the box in that space. But I would say they really are an interim tool that need a transition phase and then a maintenance program in the long run. So there's some great studies around diabetes remission that have been done both locally and overseas, and they will use these sorts of tools up front, but there needs to then be a follow-on plan thereafter.
I had another question from somebody that was about grazing throughout the day. Is that better for fat loss than fasting? So does it make a difference if you kind of fueling your body consistently throughout the day, or if you're kind of putting yourself into starvation for you know 16 hours? Does that what's better for? the body for?
Ultimately, if you had exactly the same energy requirements, person A, person B, and you ate exactly the same calorie amount, one was having in a shorter eating window, one was eating more frequently. Technically, at a population level, you should both have fairly similar weight outcomes over the first sort of few months. You may find a bit of differences in the first few weeks. And when you extrapolate it out to sort of 12 months or longer, most of the dietary studies will show, look, there's only sort of a kilo or so either way between those different groups of people. That said, it really comes down to what feels good for fueling your own bodies. So some people eating regularly will be the thing for them. Some people won't feel like eating first thing in the morning. Maybe they feel really unwell if they eat early in the morning. And then it kind of makes sense to shift things around a little bit. I think it's also really important to factor in that, you know, we can all have very different lifestyles. So shift workers, for example, won't just have a rigid, this is what I do every day, but they might have to have variations in their fueling depending on what sort of shifts they're working.
Right.
I do
What
find
a,
it interesting though, sorry, I'll just add to that, that predominantly all of the fasting um, sort of popular diets out there will be delayed breakfast. There's actually also nothing wrong with having a longer fasting period starting earlier in the afternoon. And so, you know, you hypothetically could start eating at 5 a.m. in the morning and finish mid afternoon, for example. It's just the most popular presentations of it are emphasizing the kind of, you know, fast until 11, 12, etc., to fit around the fact that most households have their main meal in the evening. But there's no reason why that has to be the case for everybody. And I said different shifts and things like that, there can be some flexibility around that.
yeah, yeah. I guess the reason why I would say I do it is that when we discussed it, when we were gonna start doing it, we're like, well, the one meal you go out with friends usually is like lunch or dinner, and we're like, well, that's the easiest. And then when you do go out for that one breakfast, we're not strict. We're like, we'll have breakfast when that happens. You have to be flexible as well. You can't just be, no, I can't do that because it does affect your social life a bit as well.
Absolutely, and that could be said for any rigid diet. It's not going to be life proof. There's got to be a bit of flexibility for social situations, for when you're not, you know, at home, all sorts of things where you'll need a bit of flexibility for that.
Right. Now, if somebody has, let's say, they're specific, like a vegetarian or a vegan or something like that that need special help, is there somebody that they can chat with? Just because I know that we do have some people like that that would need special attention because obviously this is generic and we can't go into each diet. But is there somebody that, because yeah, it would just probably help a few people.
Yeah, so particularly in the plant-based space, one of my colleagues, Melissa, that's her area of expertise and interest. So she follows a plant-based diet herself and has really, really fabulous product knowledge, knowledge on and recommendations around when people will need supplementation, depending on what their circumstances are. So if what you're doing is working, you're ticking your fitness goals, you're feeling good, there's no health issues, keep doing what you're doing. But if you're finding what you're doing is not quite working for you, or you're needing a bit of an overview of making some improvements, then yeah, definitely reaching out to a plant-based dietitian. So you can reach out to any of the trainers and they can pass on our details.
I'll
Or
pop
if
all the information in the chat so that not this chat, but once I post it, I'll put everybody's kind of contact details just in case they want to set up a private message because sometimes people don't like to put it all out there for everybody else. Um, does that sound good?
Yeah, that's great. And what I would
Awesome.
say with the vegan and vegetarian foods, a bit like those high protein products, there are now so many processed vegan and vegetarian foods that you really, really need to be a superstar at reading food labels to kind of make a decision if some of them actually are part of a core diet or are essentially a really highly processed junk food. More so than I would say the mainstream supermarket, the plant-based foods. Plant-based sounds healthy, but sometimes when you flip that ingredient list over, you're like, oh my God, what am I
I have
eating?
no idea what that says.